What a wonderful, keen bunch you are. Good morning, everyone. Great to see you. 42 of you already online, so that's great that so many of you have joined us so early. We're starting in 5 minutes, so you still have time for a quick loo break or a cup of tea or coffee, a slice of toast or anything of that nature, and we'll be kicking off in 5 minutes at 9 o'clock or just a minute past or something to make sure that everyone gets to join us. I'll be starting off with a shallow dive, just talking about the energy sector as a whole across the east of England, and then our colleagues at Sizewell C and at the Suffolk Chamber of Commerce will give you a much deeper dive into what's happening at the Sizewell C project and the opportunities for the supply chain there. So come back and join us in just over 5 minutes time, just after 9 o'clock, and see you all then. Thanks very much indeed, everyone. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Energising Essex. This is the first of a series of roadshows we're doing, looking at the opportunities in the supply chain for companies, both those that are already in the energy sector and those that are new to the energy sector. And we'll be going through some of the opportunities that there are for you there, starting off overall with an overview right the way across the region, some of the projects that are going on that may be of interest to you. And then we'll be focusing in particular on the Sizewell B development. So I'm delighted to welcome you here today. I had been hoping to welcome you to Colchester and to talk about comparing the bacon rolls between Ipswich Town Football Club, Norwich City and Colchester, in the hope that we'd be having a vote to see who did the best bacon rolls and the best coffee. Sadly, that isn't the case now, but we're certainly hoping for the future that the rest of these events will now be face-to-face as opposed to virtual. But I think, as you know, caution was what we were trying to exercise on this particular project, trying to ensure that we keep the pandemic and to a sensible level and limiting the risk as much as we possibly can. So welcome everyone. I hope you have a tea or coffee in hand. I wish that we could have handed you bacon rolls as well this morning, or vegetarian choices. But obviously we're doing this remotely today. Just to say, we are going to be recording this as well. So you will be able to watch it for posterity if you need to as well. Could I have the next slide, please? Great stuff. Well, a few items of housekeeping. First of all, but by signing up to this webinar, you've already given your permission, effectively, for the event organisers to hold your details so that we can contact you, obviously, for future events. And as I mentioned earlier on, we are recording this, so you'll be able to watch this at any time in the future if you need to as well, or if you want to share it with other colleagues and so on, and you'll be able to send that on to other people. If I could ask you to make sure that your mics and cameras are turned off, unless you're a speaker during the course of the presentation. There'll be an opportunity for question and answers, hopefully at the end, if we don't run out of time. And any questions, if you could use the chat facility at the bottom in the middle of the screen there, you'll see this chat facility there. And if you click on that, you can post your questions in there. And do please post lots of questions. If we can't get through them all, we'll try and answer them all after the event as well. And as I say, it is being recorded, and we'll also do a survey afterwards. And if I can ask you if you would respond to that survey, we want to make sure that we do this properly and that we improve anything where we can. And if you have any questions about any of those issues, please do feel free to contact our events manager, Anna Castles, and Anna's contact details are there on screen for you. If I could have the next slide, please. Hi everyone, my name is Simon Gray. I'm the Director of Policy and External Affairs here at EAGER, and I'll tell you a little bit more about EAGER for those of you that might not be familiar with it in just a little while. If I have the next slide, please. So, Energising Essex, well, yes, this is roadshow event number 1, and we're working with a number of our colleagues right the way across the region. So it's Essex County Council, in particular, the North Essex Economic Board, NEB, and in association also with Sizewell C and our colleagues at North Falls and at Five Estuaries as well, and Eastport Essex as well. So I'm delighted that, thanks very much to North Falls, Freeport East, Five Estuaries and Sizewell C, and the North Essex Economic Board for sponsoring and supporting these events with us. Now, I'll be going through some of the incredible opportunities there are in the east of England for the right the way through the energy transition. And we'll talk a little bit more about transition in just a second. But we'll be looking at the nuclear sectors, renewable sectors, oil and gas, transmission, network, distribution and storage, the ports and the various ports right the way around our region that are all benefiting from what's happening in the energy sector. Also be looking a bit at infrastructure. I know Tom and our colleagues from Sizewell will be talking a little bit more about the local infrastructure around Sizewell a little bit later as well. We'll also talk about some skills, careers and training. There are some massive opportunities for colleges, universities and private skills developers and training companies to benefit from some of the areas we're looking at here today as well. We'll also be looking at how the supply chain can develop into this sector and also how you can plan your pathway into this sector as well. We'll also be having a presentation from Alan Hyatt from the Department of International Trade, talking about the opportunities that there are internationally for the supply chain as well, just to really prove that it's not only a local market, it's a national market and it's an international market. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so there's a young lady that a few of you will have seen before, Greta Thunberg. And obviously we saw all that activity during COP26. And those of you may have come across that this phrase that's being used now, increasingly energy transition and what it will mean to all of us, both at our work and our domestic life as well. So the challenge that there is massive. It's huge for all of us. We're going to be looking at electric vehicles and changing really the way we live to a great extent, and electrifying our households and our businesses. And as that happens, not only does that present challenges, but it presents some huge opportunities for us as we see spending in the energy sector increasing rapidly right the way across the UK, and in particular in the East of England. I'll explain why in just a little while. So according to the International Renewable, sorry, can I go back to the previous slide? Yeah, if you can, please. Thanks very much. So according to the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, they're saying that just maintaining global temperature increases to below 1.5, so ensuring that the planet doesn't increase its temperature any more than 1.5 degrees, will grow the world's economy by about 2.4%. So by doing the right thing for the planet, we're actually growing the economy and doubling the number of people that will be employed globally in the sector as well. And the renewable sector alone will employ around 43 million people globally. And some of these figures are just astronomical. $44 trillion in investment. That's around 5% of global gross domestic product. So some amazing figures there. And on average, requiring that just to stay within that 1.5 degree target. In addition, they say a further 33 trillion would be required in efficiencies, in renewables, end-use electrification, power grids, flexible hydrogen, and we'll touch on hydrogen just a moment, and new innovation through to 2050. Seeing investments of somewhere between 60 and 160 trillion dollars by mid-century. So some mind-boggling numbers there. Next slide, please. Thanks. So here's a map of our region, and you can see there that the yellow patches there are the gas fields off our coast here, and we've seen over 60 years of production of gas off our coast in the southern North Sea there, and there are in fact still quite large reserves left. They're much more difficult to get at than they used to be, but there are still large reserves left, and we could go for that. And there's still a school of thought that says, well, do you leave it there or do you drill for it and go for it? And I'll touch on that in just a minute, because it may well still be worth going for gas. The region also sees, and you see some pink lines going out, that's the connections, those are the various pipelines right the way around the southern North Sea, including, as you see, a couple that go off to Europe there. They're the main interconnectors to Europe. And it's worth saying that the Bacton gas terminal there, that small village there, that dot in the top there in Norfolk, the Bacton gas terminal handles about 30% of the nation's gas. During the beast from the east, it peaked at around 50%. It's still a really important, an area of really great national strategic importance to UK, the Bacton gas terminal, supplying gas for London southeast and a good chunk of the Midlands as well. I talked about, still maybe an opportunity to carry on going for gas. And the reason for that is that gas can be converted to hydrogen. And I'll touch a wee bit more on hydrogen in just a minute. And the depleted wells, so the empty wells that are out there in the southern North Sea, could be used for carbon capture and storage. And part of the process of extracting that hydrogen from natural gas produces carbon. So that carbon can be pushed back out there and injected down the wells in the southern North Sea, those depleted wells. And those wells could then be capped and abandoned for posterity, trapping that carbon down there. And you can also see there the offshore wind farms. You can see a plethora of offshore wind farms around our coast there. Would you believe that nearly 50% of the total installed capacity, I think it's about 47% of the total installed capacity in the UK, is off the coast of Norfolk, Suffolk and Essex. That's 4.6 gigawatts and around over 1,070 turbines. Now that's set to grow by a margin of about 10 times. But the percentage off the coast of Norfolk, Suffolk and Essex remains about the same. So about 40% of all offshore wind capacity will be off the coast of Norfolk, Suffolk and Essex by 2030. So there's a hell of a lot of work to be done there and a hell of a lot of opportunities for the supply chain. It's worth saying again that hydrogen, we mentioned it can be manufactured from gas. Well, hydrogen can also be manufactured by using excess wind energy, so a process called electrolysis. And using wind energy to generate hydrogen in that way is called green hydrogen. So we could see not only hydrogen from gas, but also hydrogen from offshore wind, and for that matter, hydrogen from nuclear. And Tom will be touching a little bit more on that in his presentation in relation to Sizewell C. The region also boasts a plethora of other methods of generation. We've got some of the largest solar farms in the country here. We have biomass in huge scale right the way across our region as well. Onshore wind, we've seen a fair amount of onshore wind in East Anglia as well as biofuels. So this is manufacturing fuels from a number of biosources, including things like sugar beet and maize. I mean, in terms of nuclear across our region, obviously we've got Sizewell A, which is now largely decommissioned, Sizewell B, which has had an asset life extension program, and of course the delights of Sizewell C, and Tom will be touching more about that in just a minute. And we also have just a bit further down the coast, Bradwell, and the opportunities there potentially for small nuclear into the future. Next slide, please. So here we go. These are the figures. This is what's happening. Here's a forecast on investment, and this is just the east of England. I stress that this is just the east of England. And look at that figure at the bottom there: £122 billion. So that's what we're anticipating will be spent across the region: £122 billion up to 2050. And it breaks it down there by the type of sector, so offshore wind, power transmission, ports, and so on and so forth. Indeed, we're seeing a number of the ports are putting in huge investments in here just to cater for the construction of offshore wind, nuclear, and gas still as well. It's worth saying as well that we will be sending all these slides out afterwards, so you will be able to share these with your colleagues, and you will be able to look at these in retrospect if you need to find out more about the source of this. It's worth saying this figure in here as well doesn't include some of the newer technologies such as hydrogen in there. So there's a hell of a lot of growth over and above this. So this, if anything, is a conservative estimate. Next slide, please. On the domestic front, I mean, we're all seeing some massive changes on the domestic front at home. Just to say that by 2025, gas and oil boilers will be banned from new build homes. So from 2025 onwards, we've got to find new ways of heating and cooking in our homes as well. The Department of Climate Change has suggested that some 3.3 million heat pumps will need to be installed at existing homes by 2030, rising to 8 million by 2035 to reach net zero. So that equates to 1 million installs per year in new and existing homes by 2030. And there simply are not enough people currently trained to be able to install these. So again, there's a huge opportunity there on the domestic front for transforming the way in which we heat and cook in our homes as well. Now, others believe that hydrogen may be the answer to the future, and I've touched on that a little bit already. And indeed, hydrogen could be used to heat homes. Initially, they're looking at blending it on the grid. So this is National Grid looking at blending around initially 12%. So it might start with lower percentages, but up to 12% blended with natural gas on the grid. And then it's really to see whether there is the potential to have 100% pure hydrogen grid for the future as well. I told you how hydrogen can be generated from gas, utilizing carbon capture and storage, from renewable energy, using electrolysis, and that's green hydrogen, and also from nuclear. And as I said, Tom will touch a little bit more on generating hydrogen from nuclear as well. And we'll be having a deeper dive into hydrogen and into the domestic sector as well, and its impact upon the supply chain and the opportunities at some of our future events in Energising Essex. So do look on our website, on our events website, to keep up to date with Energising Essex events. Next slide, please. So I've listed on the right-hand side there the government's 10-point plan for a green revolution. This is what government have signed up to. This is what the government wants us to do. This is how we're seeing changes in what's happening in our country. And we'll be having a deeper dive into a number of these subjects, as I say, in the roadshow, including a dedicated event looking at the offshore wind, and in particular, the North Falls and Five Estuaries projects, which will be happening off the Kent coast. These are extensions to existing wind farms, and I'll be talking a little bit more depth on those projects in just a minute or two. We'll also be having a deeper dive into Freeport East and the developments there for their energy proposition. There are huge plans for Freeport East and the whole energy sector. So do look out for that one as well, because I think the Freeport East has huge potential for all of us in this region. Also looking at domestic and SME solutions. I touched on some earlier, but we're having a deep dive into those areas as well, such things as heat pumps and remedial action for retrofits of properties as well. So do look out for those future events. We'll also be looking at networks, grids, storage facilities, and opportunities in hydrogen. So all of those will be covered at future events. Next slide, please. So let me tell you a little bit more about my organisation, EGA. So it's the East of England Energy Group. We're a 20-year-old industry-led membership organisation and serving the entire all energy sector. So right the way across oil and gas, nuclear, renewables, storage, networks and transmission. So all of those kind of areas we work in. We provide our members and the region with business development. We lobby government both nationally and locally and regionally. We're in skills leadership. We have a program called Skills for Energy, and two of my colleagues will be taking you through what we do in the whole skills arena just a little bit later on today. We put on events like this. We prefer doing face-to-face events, and we hope to do many, many more of those for the future, so we can actually meet up over a bacon roll and a cup of coffee, I hope, in the future for the rest of these supply chain events. We try and highlight supply chain opportunities to the supply chain, and we also try and put buyers and vendors in touch with one another, and we do meet the buyer events, both virtual and face-to-face. And we also try and stimulate innovation through awards that we put on and try to work with companies to grow their businesses. We recognise the opportunities that the UK's net zero ambition is creating right the way across the region and all energy sectors as well. We want to maximise the East of England as being at the very centre of this energy revolution. And it's worth saying about a third of the nation's energy will come from the East of England. So that's the kind of opportunity that we have here in the East of England and Essex in particular. So as EGA enters its third decade, we believe that we can become an even stronger beacon and voice for our region's landscape. Next slide, please. So that gives you an idea about our regional footprint. We provide support and coverage across Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, and Cambridgeshire, including Peterborough as well there. And you can see on the right-hand side there, all the different energy areas that we cover there. So it's everything from aquaculture through to marine science, reuse and decommissioning of existing infrastructure across the region. So it's a huge region, it's a huge opportunity, and I'm delighted to say that East Anglia is at the very, very centre of this. Next slide, please. So EGA has a number of special interest groups and clusters that we formed, and we work with a number of different stakeholders here. So government companies, including the Oil and Gas Authority, local enterprise partnerships, both the NALEP, CLEP, and the Cambridge and Peterborough LEP, and local authorities, so county councils, district councils, and we work with all of those to try and ensure that those regions know about these opportunities and stimulate businesses within their areas to try and grow into the energy sector. One of the projects we have on is called the Bacton Energy Hub, up at Bacton in North Norfolk. But just because you may be outside of Norfolk doesn't mean to say you can't engage on this. So companies actually globally, right the way around the world, a number of interests from global players in the Bacton Energy Hub. As I mentioned earlier, Bacton feeds London, the South East Midlands, and the opportunity really to make Bacton a real centre for hydrogen is being looked at and studied at this moment. And we're working on that one with the oil and gas authorities and the developers and operators in the southern North Sea there as well. And that also includes looking at such things as not only hydrogen supply, but hydrogen demand, the infrastructure that was required to be able to do that, the regulatory system that would govern hydrogen for the future, and the supply chain and technology that goes along with that. So that's a whole project in its own right. And if you want to engage on that, we can give you more information on that. So do contact us if that's an area of interest for you. Decommissioning and reuse of southern North Sea assets. This is pipelines, platforms, well plugging and abandonment. All of this has to be done. That's a multi-million pound, a billion pound business as well. We work on that with our colleagues at the Oil and Gas Authority and Decom North Sea as well. So if that's something you're interested in, talk to us about that as well. We work on marine science with our colleagues at CFAS, which is the Centre for Environment, Fisheries and Aquaculture. Massive opportunities in the whole marine sector. We've got to look at decarbonising our entire marine fleet. We've got to look at ways in which we can maintain and look after and protect our marine environment as well. Things like our fishing stocks, which are so key. Also, how we transfer across some of the skills from one sector to another sector within the whole marine environment. We also have an offshore wind regional cluster, and you can see a publication there, East of England Offshore Wind Cluster Forum. That's the report of our first forum that we held. And I've put a link within the presentation here that you'll be able to click on when you receive the presentation yourselves to be able to download that brochure. And you can register to join the offshore wind cluster and find out how you can benefit and work with the region's offshore wind companies and the supply chain there. We also have an innovation group that we work on with the Offshore Renewable Energy, that's ORE, Offshore Renewable Energy Catapult. So those are some of our special interest groups and clusters. If you want to engage in any of those, do contact us and we'll try and plug you into the right people there. Next slide, please. So some of the membership benefits for EAGA, of joining EAGA, we have a business event. We work with our customers. We do one-to-one introductions. You can join our virtual and face-to-face events. And it's worth saying that by becoming an EAGA member, you get discounts on our paid-for events, such as it says SNS 2021 there, SNS 2022 now, and we'll touch on that a little bit more later on. So that's our key and largest event that we have every year, an exhibition, a conference, and a Meet the Buyer session, which happens for 2 days in Norwich, and we'll come up with that a little bit later on with more details of that. We also put on events for individuals, so individual companies that may be wishing to try and launch themselves into the industry. We can help you do that. We can profile your company in our supply chain directory and drive traffic to your website by featuring you in our regular e-shots that we send out every week. And we can feature on our website, and we have a great social media channels. We have a large audience on social media now, so do feel free to contact us and how you can benefit and expand your business through that. And we can also highlight your news by sending out via our marketing emails, which actually go out now to over 4,000 energy professionals. As I say, we lobby, we have regular meetings with government, and we have an annual House of Commons reception. So if you want to try and get your voice heard in that way, do talk to us on that front, and we can try and help you there as well. We'll be talking more about skills for energy in just a minute, but if you want to work with the colleges, universities and schools to try and ensure that you have the workforce for the future, then do talk to us about that as well. And as I say, we try and innovate, and we try and help people innovate, and we try and promote innovation right the way across the industry. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to have a little shallow dive at this stage into the Five Estuaries and North Falls offshore wind farm projects. So these are 2 wind farms. These are extensions to existing wind farms. If I could have the next slide, please. So these are extensions to the Greater Gabbard and Galloper wind farms, which already exist off the coast of Essex, with a facility in Lowestoft and another facility in Harwich, both of which were multi-million pound investments there, £1.2 billion investment in just one wind farm there. And this is expanding the capacity of those wind farms. This is Greater Gabbard and Galloper. The planning authorities have given the first stages of those, and we were looking for both projects are also looking for discussions with National Grid at the moment as to where the connectivity, how they can connect onto the grid. So that's taking place as we speak, and the projects will be generating even more green energy, green electricity, helping to reduce carbon emissions right the way across our country and to fight climate change. So important projects, and both projects will be operational, it's hoped, by the end of the decade to meet the UK government's net zero ambitions. Next slide, please. So the projects, one's 20 kilometres off the coast, the other's 36 kilometres off the coast. They're of similar sizes, 149 and 150 square kilometres. Survey work on both projects are being done at the moment, and it's being assessed, looking at how they can engage with stakeholders. So both of these wind farms are very keen to find local stakeholders, particularly in Essex, the Essex area, to try and develop business in Essex for these projects. They want as much local content as they can get into these wind farms as well. So do make sure that you work with us in developing your business and how you can benefit from these particular projects. So consents and applications on these are being put in as we speak. Environmental data is being brought forward, and submission for mid-2023 on both projects as well. Slightly different ownership of the two projects. So North Falls is SSE Renewables and RWE, whereas Five Estuaries is RWE, Macquarie, Siemens, ESB, and Samito Corporation. So two projects, very similar projects, similar sizes, one slightly further offshore than the other one, and slightly different ownerships of the two projects, but huge opportunities for business in Essex. Next slide, please. So there's a list here of the project benefits that this has brought to the region. So already, Greater Gabbard, I mentioned to you, is a £1.5 billion investment Greater Gabbard was, with a construction out of Lowestoft and a maintenance base at Lowestoft. Around 100 long-term jobs were created out of that, with 95% of those people recruited from the local area. So it's great to see local jobs for local people, Indigenous people from our region. And these are well-paid jobs, and they're probably sort of two generations of employees we're looking at here. So these are skilled, well-paid, long-term jobs created in our region. And Greater Gabbard also engaged 10 apprentices there as well. And since its inception, Greater Gabbard's invested around 250,000 in community funds and local projects and training initiatives in the area. Galloper is the sister project to Five Estuaries. That led to the creation of 700 jobs during construction. There was a £10 billion investment in a new O&M, operations and maintenance base in Harwich, generating contracts, including as well on that East Coast companies, a number of East Coast companies. The base now employs 60-odd people in long-term, as I say, long-term, well-paid, skilled jobs. And 5 apprenticeships have been appointed there since the O&M base was opened. The project's also employed a number of ex-armed forces personnel, and our Skills for Energy team has been working with a number of people from the armed forces, transitioning them across into the energy sector, and won the Silver Award in the Armed Forces Covenant Employee Recognition Scheme. The wind farm and its operations and maintenance team have supported numerous local initiatives in the community, and they have their own community fund as well. And the Galloper team have also delivered numerous career insight sessions and STEM presentations, and work with pupils and teachers within schools to promote knowledge of renewable industry. Indeed, and that's what we're going to be hearing a little bit more in just a minute with our Skills for Energy presentation. Next slide, please. There we are. What a great segue. Skills for Energy. I'm delighted now to welcome onto the screen Gemma Head and Gabby Waterman. Gemma and Gabby both work at EAGER in our Skills for Energy project, and both of them will be speaking about what we're doing on skills. So Gemma is our head of skills, Gabby is our skills manager. Gemma, over to you first of all.
Thanks, Simon. Good morning, everyone. It's well, I'd love to say it's nice to see you, but I can just see little boxes on the screen. But I know you're all there and listening intently. So thank you for joining us. So as Simon said there, my name's Gemma Head. I'm EAGER's Head of Skills and Company Secretary. Gabby, did you want to just introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Gabby Waterman and I'm the Skills for Energy Manager at EAGER.
Thanks, Gabby. So we're going to just talk you through a little bit about Skills for Energy and what we do. So with that, I'm going to ask for a video just to be played now, which gives a good introduction to the Skills for Energy programme. So if we can press play on the video, please, that'd be great. So thank you for that. If we could just have the next slide, please. Excellent, thank you. So just to give you a bit of an update, so that video gives a good overview as to the Skills for Energy programme and what we look to do here. But just to give you a bit of an update in terms of what's coming next. So as it mentions there, with the Skills for Energy programme, we champion the energy industry as an industry of choice. It's something that we're really keen to encourage. We work right across the board, as the video said there, with regards to working with students. So we work through education at all different levels. We work with the military, we work with job seekers and job centres, essentially anybody and everybody that's looking towards the energy sector or might be looking towards the energy sector in terms of their future careers. But in addition to that, we want to work with you to understand what your skills requirements are and how we can look to promote that message into those audiences that we're working with. So please do reach out. It did have our email address on the video there, but I know Gabby will give you a reminder as to what that is just in a couple of slides' time. So hopefully some of you will have seen that we've recently relaunched our social media presence. So we had a little bit of social media presence, particularly in terms of LinkedIn, but we recognised that that was more business driven. So we've launched on Instagram and Facebook, and there are rumours of moving on to TikTok as well, although I'm not too sure that it'll be me that's featuring on there, but we'll see. But we recognise that this is a really important platform in terms of engaging with an increased audience and particularly with younger people. We've launched a Skills for Energy website, so that was launched last year in March, and it's a fantastic platform for those resources, for information, for any of our audiences that are looking to understand a little bit more about the Skills for Energy programme and ultimately about the energy industry, which we're here to represent. And as I mentioned, we're reaching out to organisations to consider how you might be able to help. So we want to help you, but also we'd also like to ask you to help us. So that can be through offering work experience. You might be able to offer talks or webinars, whatever it may be. We really do want to promote the message as to what a fantastic industry this is. And just that bottom point there, so we're building on the Skills for Energy event. So unfortunately, obviously, given current circumstances, we haven't been able to run it as a face-to-face event for the last couple of years, but we're really keen to get this going again. And we've got a date in the diary for the 30th of November. So make sure you scribble that one down. We'd love to see you there. This is a student event and it's a super interactive, really energetic event. And we'd really love to have your participation in that. So Gabby, can I hand over to you, please?
Yeah, of course. Next slide, please. So as we touched on, we work with students in a variety of capacity, and we've recently, over the past few months, developed a free classroom activity called the Young Energisers programme. So this programme consists of 4 classroom activities to introduce the students to the energy sector in an engaging manner. These have been designed with the support of both industry experts and careers leaders. So whilst we're ensuring the students receive the most up-to-date and relevant information, they also are aligned with the curriculum and help the schools achieve the Gatsby benchmarks and work towards the CDI careers framework. So the rationale behind these activities is based on the lack of diversity seen within the industry, especially the issue of the leaky STEM pipeline, in which young females are more often to kind of drop out of STEM subjects when it gets to optional level. So we've designed these to initially be suitable for Year 8 students, so slightly younger audience than we've often worked with, to really try and kind of raise their ambitions from a younger age about working in the energy industry. So the overall objective is to help young people develop skills and raise awareness of the wide range of career opportunities. We've also made sure that these have been designed to be as flexible as possible, as we appreciate, especially at the moment, every school may feel differently in terms of what they're comfortable doing, having kind of external members into the school. So these can be delivered in person or virtually, and again by either an energy industry representative, by a teacher, or by myself or Gemma. And we've kind of created them so they can also be adapted and differentiated for different kind of levels or year groups. Next slide, please. So the 4 activities are based on renewables, oil and gas, nuclear and emergency response. Each session introduces the students to the sector before kind of having an interactive element, but within all of them, there's a strong emphasis on the career opportunities. So with renewables, the activity is to build a wind turbine to test blade efficiency. Oil and gas really focuses on kind of the new and emerging technologies, and emphasises to students that the subjects you may be studying and enjoying now may kind of help you in a job that doesn't yet exist in the world yet. And then their activity is to design and build a prototype remotely operated vehicle. With nuclear, again, they get introduced to nuclear and focus on the skills and behaviours required for the industry. There's a strong focus here about upcoming opportunities. So, for example, Sizewell C and the proposal for 1,500 apprentices. This activity is then to construct pylons to test the effect of forces and loads on structures, so how much weight they can withstand and how much wind they can withstand. And then finally, the last activity, slightly different. This is based on emergency response. So we give them the scenario of an onshore, a fire on an onshore wind turbine, and they work within groups and are given different job roles. So, for example, a police officer or a journalist, and they go through a tabletop exercise, which is what is used in the industry to kind of work out their next steps to how to best deal to the emergency. So that's an overview of Skills for Energy and kind of what we're up to at the moment. If anyone has any questions, obviously ask them and we'll answer at the end. Or if you want to know how you can get involved, feel free to contact us at skills@ega.com. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Hi everyone, Simon again, just to say that we're now having a deep dive into Sizewell C. Delighted to be joined today by Tom McGarry, the head of Regional External Affairs at Sizewell C. And Tom will be giving us a real insight into what's happening at Sizewell and the future opportunities there are for the supply chain right the way across the region, Essex in particular. Tom, over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much. It would have been great to be at Colchester United this morning, and I say that as an Ipswich Town season ticket holder. Hopefully, though, now with recent announcements, we'll be able to have more and more of these sorts of presentations and meetings on the opportunities that we have coming our way very soon indeed. I'm going to share my screen with my presentation, so hopefully that should work now. Got a rather interesting setup here. One second. See, that's one of the things that you don't have to worry about when you're in a situation with a hair. Now, can everybody see this? I'm looking to...
Yes, we can see it, Tom, that's fine.
You can see it, great, okay. So, I'm Tom McGarry, I'm the head of Regional External Affairs and Development for the Sizewell C project. Now, I've been working on Sizewell C since August 2010, which tells its own story about how long it takes to actually get major infrastructure projects over the line and through the system here in Britain. But needless to say, it's been done in a way that has placed public consultation, the feedback from local communities, and of course in line with planning policy in order to get there. This is a very, very large complex project, and it will take a decade to build. So in the planning of it, we have to take the requisite amount of time and care in order to make sure that we are proposing something that can be delivered. So in order to make sure that this audience, many of you who may be new to the project, get a good introduction to it, I will give you some very brief background, but ultimately what I want to do today is to make sure that by the end of this presentation, you have all the essential questions answered. Where we're going to be building and developing, what we are going to be building, and crucially, while Simon has of course addressed this particular question on why we are building low carbon infrastructure, I do think we also need to have just a brief bit of attention paid towards why we are building a new nuclear power station, and of course why it's the second one that will be in train here in the UK alongside Hinkley Point C in Somerset. I want to talk a bit about the how we're going to build it as well. Not into great detail. You'll be pleased to know that I am not an engineer of any description, so I won't go into the, or a nuclear physicist for that matter, so I won't be going into the deep dive on that aspect, but I will touch on how the logistics will work and how elements that will be of interest to us as residents of East Anglia, and how we will be working on the logistics, on the transport, and how we'll get materials and people to site, and indeed how employees will get to site of your various businesses, in order to make sure that we've got a strong local workforce and local supply chain delivering Sizewell C. I will address the when. I mentioned that I've been working on this for over a decade, and believe you me, I am anxious to start getting the shovels out and getting on with this, as you can imagine. And I can really say now that you are joining, if you have come for the first time to a Sizewell C presentation, you're joining us at precisely the right time. 2022 is indeed the crunch year for Sizewell C in terms of number of decisions and indeed the potential start on site. I'll then go on to talk about what's in it for you. And in terms of what's in it for you, in terms of supply chain opportunities, really that's going to be led by my colleague Ashley from the Suffolk Chamber of Commerce. We have a long-standing partnership with the Suffolk Chamber into developing the local supply chain. And it's not just focused on Suffolk. That partnership takes in Norfolk and Essex and Cambridgeshire as well. East Anglia is going to benefit from the building of Sizewell C, and its businesses are going to win contracts, and Ashley will be indicating to you precisely how that can happen. And finally, I will touch on some of the elements that Simon has referred to, and about how we're building more than just a power station and looking to the future. And that's not just going to be in regard to the hydrogen economy and the rest of the aspects of the low carbon economy, where Sizewell could form this kind of centre of an energy hub. It's also about the other major infrastructure projects in the pipeline, in the energy sector and associated sectors in the East, and how involvement in this project and getting the qualifications and standards required to work on this project can stand you in good stead for further works that are going on with other projects all around our energy coast here in the East of England. So a brief bit of background first. So I asked that, you know, much to the consternation of the of colleagues here, if I could maybe just have control of my screen, and we might have had a bit of a nervous start there. But the reason for that is so that I could have this little pointer, and to have control over this little pointer means that I can just indicate some features that you can see on this artist's impression of Sizewell C alongside existing infrastructure on our part of the Suffolk coast, roughly almost directly in between Lowestoft and Felixstowe, in the middle of the Suffolk Heritage Coast and in the area of outstanding natural beauty. Now, nuclear is a long established industry in Suffolk and is well supported by the community, businesses, industry and third sector leaders across the county. Sizewell A began construction way back in 1960, and Sizewell B has a long history of being a good neighbour, and since the construction of Sizewell A in the 60s, the nuclear sector has been a very important employer, offering diversity, high wages and skills into East Suffolk's economy. Those of you familiar with the coastline here would recognise the more brutalist facade of the turbine hall there of Sizewell A, as was mentioned by Simon. That was fully defueled of all of the spent fuel, the flasks that contain the very radioactive elements that have now been in summer of 2014 transported to Sellafield for storage and processing. And now a lot of the work that's going to be happening over the next 50 years of that advanced gas cooled reactor, that Magnox reactor, is going to be the decommissioning of other parts of the site. Now, Sizewell B is a pressurized water reactor, which is a very different technology. You know, the reactor is cooled by closed circuit of water, not by gas. And pressurized water reactors, this is a Westinghouse, an American design, they can be decommissioned and in fact, turned into a green field with a fence around it by in the space of 25 years, so much quicker than Sizewell A. As you can see, this structure at the back of the current site is our new dry fuel store. I say new, it's been in operation now for a couple of years, and that's where again all of that spent fuel, the spent fuel rods, are transported safely out of the reactor, and once we've effectively, for a non-technical term, let's just say we've got all the juice out of them, we pack them in to these steel containers packed in with concrete, and then they are easy to transport and to be held safely in that facility there, and then of course onto the storage facility for spent nuclear fuel, which is present, of course, Sellafield, but also the UK government is looking into a deep geological repository for the long-term storage of our nuclear spent fuel. And of course, research and development is going on all the time as to how we can still use the residual heat and power within that spent fuel. I'll come on to talk a little bit more about Sizewell B and Sizewell A, but the crucial point here is you can see this artist's impression of Sizewell C, and this is actually nearing the completion of construction. This artist's impression, you can see the access road there, but some spoil heaps in the background as well. But that's just a schematic at the moment, just to show you the background and to highlight the background of what we wish to build on the Suffolk coast. Now, the status of the UK's existing and proposed nuclear power stations is important, but I did say where we are building it. As I noted, Suffolk is the county to the east of Essex, and indeed East Suffolk Council, I think with about 47 miles of coastline, it probably has the longest line of coast of any district council in the country. Now, the challenge we've got in terms of nuclear and its role within the in the electricity generating sector in the UK is that we went from a high in the early 1990s of generating around 20% of the UK's electricity. We're currently around 17%. But as you can see from this map, which indicates where our operating nuclear power stations are, as you can see, rather nervously, we look at the number of stations that are going to be closing and reaching the end of their operating lives over the course of the next decade. Now, we are building Hinkley Point C in Somerset at present, and I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. But that is going to generate 7% of the UK's electricity, and Sizewell C could do the same. But by 2035, Sizewell B, we anticipate, may be able to have a life extension of about 20 years. So between Hinkley Point C, Sizewell C and Sizewell B, building those two power stations will just get us at the 17% that we're currently at, and that we see and that we require, because as the example of Germany shows, you close down your nuclear power stations, you can't necessarily fill it with renewables. Renewables are intermittent, and Germany is now building new coal mines and mining more coal and new coal plants as well, and as a result is one of the highest emitters from its electricity generating sector in Europe. Normally what happens when you shut down a nuclear reactor, you're going the wrong direction in terms of generating low carbon electricity and burning fossil fuels. That's precisely not where we need to be going. So as you can see, Sizewell C is going to be a very, very important part of our electricity generating mix to provide that stable baseload of low carbon power. Otherwise, we are left with Hinkley Point C, Sizewell B, and a deficit on something that we can rely on at present within UK PLC, and indeed for all of our homes and our economy going into the future. I mentioned about Sizewell A being built in the from 1960 to 1966. We have a strong nuclear legacy here. It surprises many people to know this, but Sizewell A, there was actually an advert in a national newspaper. The government were looking for sites to build new nuclear power stations, and it was actually Leiston Town Council at the time that wrote to government to say, please have a look at Sizewell, essentially because they were reacting to the situation of more and more young people from the local area going to places further afield, like Ipswich and even Colchester, to find work. Leiston was an industrial town anyway, with the Garrett's works there, and they needed a bit more diversification of within the local economy. So they made appeals to government to look at the Sizewell A site, and the rest of the say is history. It generated electricity from 66 to 2006 when it went into decommissioning. In 2020, Sizewell B had generated enough low carbon electricity for 2.3 million homes since it's been in operation from that point for 25 years. February the 14th of 1995 was when Sizewell B was plugged into the grid following 8 years of construction, and that avoided 3 million tonnes of carbon emissions. It's equivalent to, in terms of its operation, that's the equivalent to taking 1.3 million cars off UK roads for a year. I think it's really important that we do these comparisons into a direct comparison with a combined cycle gas turbine, as an example of how much carbon is being saved from the power you can generate from a station like Sizewell B. Day in, day out, is generating 3% of the UK's electricity, and that's low carbon electricity, and that's enough electricity for all of the homes, around 2.5 million in Suffolk, Essex and Norfolk. We've got 750 people working on site, and about 40 of them are apprentices. We've got regular apprenticeships in the operations of our nuclear stations coming in every year. But again, those apprentices are going to need to find places for work as more and more of our stations go into decommissioning. And new build is going to be key for helping with that. So what we want to build, as distinct from Sizewell A and the Magnox reactors that were built throughout the 1970s, those gas-cooled reactors, is much the same technology as Sizewell B, which is a pressurized water reactor. And we want to build it we want to build the EPR just to the north of Sizewell B, as you can see in this artist's impression here, which is the completion of the station, an aerial seascape shown here. Now, the combined area here in total by the end of construction would be a nuclear licensed area, including A, B and C, of 69 hectares. But within that 69 hectares, bear in mind that this isn't generating anything here, Sizewell A, these combined 3 reactors could be generating 10% of the UK's electricity from one very small site indeed. One of the advantages of nuclear is its low land requirement. And Sizewell C, as you can see, is more or less equivalent in size to the 36 hectares that make up A and B, and that's because the 2 reactors and the 2 turbine halls are very separate. In Sizewell A, there are 2 reactors, but in Sizewell B, there's only 1 reactor. The turbine halls are by far the more pronounced architectural features of the design, as opposed to the dome of Sizewell B. And it will generate 3.2 gigawatts of electricity. That's enough for 6 million homes, 7% of the UK's electricity requirements by the time we believe it'll be operating in the early 2030s. And further to that, the power station will operate for in a region of about 60 years, potentially 80, and 900 workers will be required to operate this throughout that period of time. Each particular reactor every 18 months will be required to have an outage. That's when we power down the reactor and lots of maintenance works will take place. And that gives us a huge opportunity in the East, because with 3 reactors in that cycle, you've got to plan for an outage about 6 months in advance. So we'll always be in the process of planning for an outage. If we get the cycle, well, we will get the cycle right. And in doing so, that gives us the basis very locally to have a nuclear services sector built up around this small site on the Suffolk coast, providing regular contracts, regular engineering expertise and requirements for the maintenance of the station going through into the latter part of the century. I mentioned we're building Hinkley Point C in Somerset, so we have the advantage of going second in terms of the UK pipeline of new nuclear power stations. Hinkley Point C, it's the designer station is the EPR, European pressurized reactor. It's a pressurized water reactor like Sizewell B, but with far more safety features. And it's one of the few new designs of power station in the UK that has achieved what's called a generic design certificate from our Office of Nuclear Regulation, which is one of the most robust nuclear regulators on the planet. The Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, Kwasi Kwarteng, visited Hinkley Point C last week, and last year marked 5 years since we announced the final investment decision on Hinkley Point, and there were some big milestones achieved in the last 12 months, such as the second cooling tunnel offshore was completed. The first dome over the first unit started construction, and the first ring of Unit 2, as you can see here in the middle, was installed. Now, in mid-December, 2,600 meters cubed of concrete was poured for the tabletop of the turbine hall, which is beginning to take shape. And Unit 1 was handed over to our mechanical, electrical and HVAC, heating, ventilation and air conditioning team, and 400 meters of cable trays were already installed, and the project has now trained over 800 apprentices. Looking ahead for the calendar year ahead, our main civil works are set to accelerate this year, helped of course as well by the ongoing relaxation of COVID restrictions, and our target is to pour around 50% more concrete than in 2021. Reactor dome will be lifted and put into place. The project will be by that point around halfway to completion, and will be set to start generating electricity from Unit 1 in 2026. And this year we'll see the spend in the Southwest with Southwest companies top 4 billion, and we'll recruit our 1,000th apprentice. Now, what we want to take from Hinkley is all of the lessons learned. We do not wish to lift and shift the entire supply chain, but those multinational companies that make up the tier 1 suppliers, we would like to see them come across to take on that leadership and so on. We want you to have the opportunity to meet them, to meet these buyers of these services in a multi-tier supply chain that Ashley will come on to speak about. And what we want is intelligent replication. What we haven't had in the nuclear sector in Britain until now is we've never built the same thing twice. That is what we intend to do here. We wish to build this design of station twice. We've always, if you've tinkered and improved on designs in the past. All of those maps of reactors that I've shown and those that have been decommissioned years ago as well, they were all different. We build the same thing twice. We will save money in terms of replication. That won't be at the cost of a local supply chain. And what we wish to do is essentially just show this image here is just showing how we will take the design of the station. We will build the same thing twice here. We intend to build it more efficiently and just as safely. And the only difference with some of these buildings that are shown in red, which will not be replicated, is that this is the spent fuel store. That is exactly the same design, just in a slightly different position to the Hinkley Point C footprint, and the cooling water pump houses here, and they're slightly different in design, but that's because of the different tidal range, of course, to the Severn. So all in all, our engineers and our design team really want to make this almost, we take all those lessons learned and we essentially, bring them to Suffolk, and we can build this safely and efficiently as possible. But it's intelligent replication, as I say, not a lift and shift of the entire supply chain. Although it is worth bearing in mind that these sorts of projects, major infrastructure projects like this, they're national projects wherever they are located anyway. And at Hinkley Point C, its current value to the East of England economy, with contracts with East of England companies, is already well over £1 billion. I did mention that I would have to bore you with a few points to echo from Simon about why we will be building Sizewell C and why we need it. Now, do bear with me, but it is important that we do this because the UK is committed to meeting net zero by 2050. Nuclear power reduces our reliance on imports. We will have, self-sufficiency by replacing those nuclear power stations that are going out of operation. We also have having nuclear energy in the mix lowers costs for consumers because it is a dependable amount of electricity in the mix. Now, don't get me wrong, nuclear power stations are expensive to build, but they are cheap to operate, okay? And they provide that dependable base load of electricity into the mix. And we need more capacity to meet rising demand, not just that capacity that we're going to lose, not only in our sector, but also from gas and coal power stations reaching the end of their operating life cycles. More and more of our transport and our heating systems are being electrified. Therefore, we need to meet that capacity. And I mentioned the very small land footprint, in particular to other low carbon technologies. At Sizewell, while I mentioned that we've got a 36 hectare nuclear licensed area there, we actually own 600 hectares of the Suffolk Coast and Heaths area of outstanding natural beauty. Now that AONB was designated 4 years after Sizewell A started operation. So the idea of proposing to build a new nuclear power station in an AONB is not new. It's already happened with Sizewell B. And our management of that area has resulted in us winning awards for biodiversity management. We've got people on site who don't have much to do at all with the nuclear operations, but are responsible for the stewardship of our land, which is why we made the case that we are good stewards of nature as well. Now, yes, we do want to build on a lot of this land, and yes, we already have invested millions in compensating already by creating more and more diverse habitat and compensatory habitat in the local area to make sure that we have invested now for the impact of construction. And we know that we will be making a positive effort in tackling the biodiversity crisis as well as the climate crisis because of that low land footprint. We will actually increase our land ownership by more than a quarter as a result of building Sizewell C, and we are anticipating that we will therefore be able to achieve a 19% net gain on Natural England's biodiversity net gain formula. And this, the graph you can see at the bottom there just shows that how much per acre per year more low carbon electricity you can get out of a nuclear power station in comparison to other low carbon technologies. We have undertaken a full life cycle carbon emissions analysis of what we are doing. Now, the construction emissions, I've already mentioned a lot of concrete, and there will be a lot of steel as well. Obviously, there are going to be emissions from the construction of Sizewell C, but it's worth bearing in mind that if you look at various different studies, in particular from the UN Economic Commission for Europe, you will find that there indicates that that nuclear has the lowest carbon footprint of any low carbon technology. We do emit a lot during construction, but such is the amount of electricity that's generated that the entirety of the emissions from day one of construction until the day we plug into the grid and we have got the landscape back to recovery, we will, after 3 months, have offset all of the emissions over that period of time. And at 5.5 grams of carbon per kilowatt hour, that in terms of total emissions is far less than obviously fossil fuels, but also less than offshore wind and solar as well. We're looking to continuously reduce our carbon impact, but I think that's an important element to bear in mind, that yes, we are going to, in all the things we do to get ourselves out of the climate crisis, we're going to have to develop our way out of it. And what we are trading here is that short term of emissions, then for at least 60 to 80 years of low carbon electricity being generated. So having covered off now the where and the what and what we are building and why we're building it, I now come into how. It's going to take 9 to 12 years to build Sizewell C on this 36 hectare platform, and it's going, or 33 hectare platform, sorry. And it's therefore we are going to require about 400 hectares of additional land in order to deliver Sizewell C on that site. And we've got plenty more information on how we're doing it on sizewellc.co.uk, and you can see our plans and what all of this means. I don't have time to go into all of the different colours and what's represented on there in terms of that rather interestingly shaped construction site, but needless to say, the information is online. I will touch on it now as we are running down on time. We're aiming to start towards the end of this year, potentially early next year. And that means that the peak of construction is likely to be 2027 to 2028. The land to the north and west of the platform is going to be used during construction. Other associated developments will help us deliver freight and people to site as sustainably as possible. Our transport strategy aims at 60% of deliveries coming to site by sea and by rail. Also, at the peak of construction, we will require in the region of 8,600 people working on this project, with potentially 7,900 on site. So within that area that I just showed you there. So therefore, demand management on roads is going to be absolutely vital. So we will be proposing to build a freight management facility on the A14 as part of our overall logistics program of HGVs, managing them coming to and from site. Park and ride sites as well for those workers are going to be absolutely vital. You'd be pleased to know I won't be wasting your time talking about how we're going to accommodate people in park and ride sites coming from the north. I will imagine myself driving from Essex, either in an HGV or in a car now shortly, to show you where workers and indeed where our deliveries will be parking up before they make their onward journeys to the site. Obviously, our demand for labour will exceed local supply, and we don't want to have too much disruption to the existing economy. Displacement is a concern of a number of businesses. So we will require a transient workforce, as we have when we built Sizewell A and B. But on this time, we will be building an accommodation campus that is fit for purpose on the site, and it will accommodate at least 2,400 workers. That is going to have a major impact and a positive impact on at the peak of construction in terms of making sure that you've got thousands of workers living as well as working on site and reducing the amount of local traffic. We have approved routes to and from the site, and we'll be using modern GPS technology to make sure that HGVs and our haulage companies, that they stick to their contractual agreements by sticking to those routes that planning dictates we must take. And we will be building bypasses on the A12 of Farnham and Stratford St Andrew, and also of the B1122. That is the direct road down to Sizewell. This modal split graph here shows how we want the aggregates to be split. So we will be using rail. We anticipate at the peak of construction, that 2027 to 2028 period, we will have 5 deliveries of freight trains to the site with aggregates and various different segments of the tunnels and so on that we require being delivered to the site by freight train. We will also have sea deliveries. We will have 2 beach landing facilities, 1 permanent, that will be able to deliver aggregates to, and then the remaining 40%, in particular for materials like concrete powders that really road is the only way we can deliver them, will be delivered by road. This has meant that with the infrastructure we can put in place and that we aim to put in place, that we reduce the number of HGVs on local roads as much as possible at that peak of construction. I mentioned the freight management facility for those 40% of deliveries by HGV. It's going to be based on the Old Felixstowe Road, this freight management facility at the A12-A14 junction, Silver Hills, parking for up to 150 HGVs. And the idea is that they report in there to make sure that their slot on site is available and to make sure the conditions on the A12 heading north are fine for them to continue to make their onward journey. But this is one of the first stopping points, if you like, along the way that makes sure we have a sustainable logistics strategy and do not add to any potential problems around traffic and so on in East Suffolk. There's an amenity and welfare building there as well, and it of course can play a role as well should the Orwell Bridge need to be closed for whatever reason. This is a place where we can stop up our HGVs and indeed others as well and reduce traffic on local roads. If you were a worker coming from North Essex, I mean, our anticipated time for a commuter is, according to all the construction trade unions and construction businesses, is normally about 90 minutes. We will be encouraging you to take the A14 and the A12, of course, to work. And the idea will be that before you get into the single lanes of traffic on the A12 in the smaller villages, that we have a strategically placed park and ride facility for 1,250 parking spaces located just to the north of Wickham Market. And that will also have a postal consolidation centre for the smaller pieces of mail and deliveries and so on, so we can reduce the number of light goods vehicles coming up the A12 and into the more rural places, and also a traffic incident management area should we need to get HGVs off the A12 at any particular point if there is any problems with an RTA or anything like that along the way. In terms of the 2 villages bypass, any of you who's driven up to north towards Lowestoft, towards Norfolk using the A12 will know that the bend at Farnham has required a bypass since the time of the horse. And that was something that we found that our traffic would be a key tipping point, and you couldn't just get 2 HGVs around that bend. So the bypass of Farnham with Stratford St Andrew again is one of the major roadworks that we'll be working on early, right at the start of construction, so that we're ready for that peak of construction. All associated developments will begin at the start of construction, the end of this year, early next year, should we get all the consents we require. And that also brings me on to the Sizewell Link Road, which is a roughly 7-kilometre road that will run from the A12 south of Yoxford to close to the main entrance of the site. Now, this road means that we will not have the level of environmental impact that we could see we would have from our assessments on the environment around the villages of Middleton and Theberton, and where lots of people live along the B1122. This new road would also then facilitate the repurposing of the B1122 to be more of a quiet lane, more of a rural road. And this road will be a bespoke one then that can be used really for what will be an important industrial and energy centre in the east of England. I mentioned that we'll have rail freight trains delivering direct to site. We will have a 4.5-kilometre rail link therefore built. It's temporary, I would add, off the Saxmundham to Leiston branch line that will go direct to the construction site with a couple of concrete batching plants at the head of that railway there. We will be able to deliver direct to them, and that will mean also that we bypass any trains having to go into Leiston and disrupt locals there. I mentioned about biodiversity and how that once we've completed all of this associated development, we will remove it and we will then work on the 800 hectares or so of land we have remaining to deliver that net gain in local biodiversity. But we've also done a lot of work on that already. But I stress biodiversity and environmental management to you as potential suppliers. We will have very, very high standards indeed in terms of working within this environment, this sensitive environment, and environmental standards and qualifications that will be required. The deed of obligation package we put in as part of our proposals includes up to 100 million for environment, 22 million of which is mitigation during construction, but 78 million of which is dedicated to enhancement through a new environmental body throughout the operation of Sizewell C. And Aldhurst Farm, our 67 hectares of new habitat created by Sizewell C, is already benefiting a variety of wildlife and plants to the northwest of Leiston. In terms of the sorts of workers that we will require, that we will need throughout this period, throughout this decade, as you know, earthworks is the first major thing that we'll have to do in terms of ordering, in terms of preparing the site. Again, these slides are available to you, so you'll receive them after, and you can see how we're looking at the 6 main phases and the workforce that we will require during that period of time. And I think this will be a useful slide for you to have as reference. So I did say I wouldn't be going into great detail on the how, and we're racing through the questions now, so please bear with me. When? Right, so we're ready to build, and we're ready to support the UK to build back better. But now is a crunch time as well, I think, for the local supply chain. We need to be cracking on, and we need to be getting you meeting the buyers and getting ready for the potential start on site within the next 12 months. The design is already there. We've got the design certificate to build this sort of power station, and we've got the experience at Hinckley. In terms of planning, we submitted our development consent order application after 8 years of consultation and completed the end of the examination phase of our planning process in October. The announcement from the Secretary of State on the Sizewell C development consent order application is expected in May. It won't be a straightforward yes or no. It will probably be, well, yes, you can do this if you do X, Y, and Z, but we can work through that. In terms of the deed of obligation, which you would understand perhaps as Section 106, planning gain, community pledges, and so on, 250 million is already dedicated towards that in terms of, if you like, the hard cash terms, but the overall benefit to Suffolk in terms of the physical infrastructure improvements that will be put in place is well over £500 million. And I would struggle to know where that would be coming from if it weren't for the major infrastructure projects that have been proposed and the planning gain from them. In terms of licensing and environmental permits, we've applied for our nuclear site license and for environmental consents as well. And also in terms of financing, the nuclear energy financing bill, this will be financed differently to Hinckley. I can talk about this in questions if it's of interest, but following a vote in the Commons last week, it went through its report stage, its third reading and the Commons with a 405 majority, mainly because it has the support of the Conservatives and Labour in terms of the way in which we may be able to finance Sizewell C through a regulated asset-based model. That will mean that we are in a position that by the middle of this year, we will have planning, and then by the end of the year, with the legislation in place and with the work we are doing on investor relations so that we can get British pension funds, hedge funds, and so on investing in this project, we will be in a position where we'll be able to have a final investment decision too, and government may well have a stake as well. Early works on Sizewell C that do not trigger that development consent order are ready to go now, and there's lots of survey works underway at present. The crucial dates are shown here. The crucial dates for us coming up are the 25th of February, when the Planning Inspectorate's examining authority will issue its report to the Secretary of State, and on the 25th of May, he has up until then in order to announce the decision. That's quasi quertang, and the 6th of July will be the end of the judicial review period for any stage of the process. We will have to assess any judicial review challenge that comes through on its merits, but as at Hinckley, we may well, on the basis of that analysis, continue to fight any legal challenge, but while getting on with construction. So what's in it for you finally? Well, we're going to be supporting regional legacy skills The key difference with our Hinckley project is the number of major infrastructure projects planned in Suffolk or off its coast. Our approach to workforce delivery takes into consideration a number of third-party projects across East Anglia and the potential impacts at each phase of construction. We want to make sure there's a pipeline of well-skilled, trained people for your businesses ultimately, who can help us build Sizewell C, but also other key projects going in and around the local area. So I will again leave you to be able to read this through on the slides that are going to be shared, and that list there of all of the nationally significant infrastructure projects on the horizon. We're committed to working in partnership to deliver local aspirations and social transformation. This project will support 70,000 jobs across the UK. As I mentioned, it's a national project, happens to be located in our region. It will help level up not just within our region, but nationally too. We've got the Suffolk Chamber of Commerce partnership, which actually we'll come on to, but we are going to create 1,500 apprentices, 500 more than at Hinckley. We've got high quality skills training, which will benefit the UK construction industry beyond nuclear, as I've indicated. And we'll be creating opportunities for local people with our HE and FE partners. We have signed memorandums of understanding with every single FE and HE institution in Suffolk, and this year we are branching out into Essex and into Norfolk as well. And crucially, this is more than just a power station. The Sizewell Energy Hub, as we call it, and associated projects and partnerships, what a nuclear power plant is it basically generates a huge amount of heat. How we use that heat is how we generate electricity. So we create steam, we drive turbines, we create a lot of electricity. But the residual heat, about 60% of it goes into the North Sea, all within environmental permitted limits and so on. But there must be a better way of using that. And hydrogen, using that heat to make electrolysis more efficient is an obvious way, so that that future of electric vehicles and so on, those heavier, bigger vehicles, the HGVs that we'll be using, and indeed the buses we will use in the park and ride facilities, it would be great to be using that heat to generate the processes to create hydrogen, and to have those heavier vehicles be hydrogen vehicles, thereby reducing the amount of pollution on local roads. That's just as part of our construction plan. Indeed, into the future, hydrogen is going to be absolutely key, not only for those heavier vehicles on roads, but for shipping and aviation too. And that's why, crucially, the partnership with Freeport East, a Suffolk and Essex project of Felixstowe and Harwich, we're working very closely with them on how we can provide clean heat and power for that development. Direct air capture technology, we are also developing that, and that could potentially make Sizewell C carbon negative, because we will be taking and capturing carbon from the atmosphere. And of course, using that clean heat for industrial processes and district heating. Just before I continue, I conclude, I would just say that every time you use one of these, it does leave something of a carbon footprint. Every text message, every email, every time you do a search on the internet, all of that data is obviously being processed through large data centers that are going to account for about 15% of our carbon emissions by the end of this decade. And they have to be obviously very heavily air conditioned indeed, because of all the heat they generate. Why not, like the Scandinavian countries, can we not look at the potential, and this is what we are looking at, for transporting that heat at temperature over 80 kilometers like they do, and finding a way of having maybe the first net zero data center, so we can have a sustainable technological future, digital future. These are very exciting prospects. We want to see more applications of this nuclear plant. And if you're in under the supply chain now, you can support us in doing that all the way through for the decades to come. I'd just like to thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.
Wow, Tom, that was amazing. A quick gallop through, but nonetheless, it's quite some depth there. Just to reiterate that all the slides will be made available after the event, and the whole event is being recorded as well, so you'll be able to access any of those for posterity. Quite a few of you, I can see some questions coming in. If I could ask you to go to the Q&A section and put any questions that you may have in there, and we'll run through those with Tom and others after the presentations. So go to the Q&A section and put your questions in there, please. please, that would be great. I see there's already a couple in there, and there was already some in the chat as well. And I see that my colleague Anna has also had some emailed through to her, which she's put in the chat section as well. So we've already got a few questions rolling in there, but do feel free to post your questions and we'll address those at the end of all the presentations. So next up, I'm delighted to be able to welcome Ashley. Ashley Shorey-Mells is Sizewell C Supply Chain Head of Engagement at Suffolk Chamber of Commerce. And as Tom McGarry mentioned there, the Suffolk Chamber were engaged many years ago now to run the portal, the supply chain portal, on behalf of Sizewell C. So Ashley's going to be able to tell us more about how that works and how you can register your business with Sizewell C and be contacted from there. So Ashley, over to you.
Thank you, Simon. Morning, everybody. Simon's introduced me, so I don't need to do that bit, but nice to see you all. And I appreciate there's quite a few questions that have come in from the supply chain, so we will attack them a bit later on. So don't worry, you will get an answer. And hopefully some of the stuff I say in the next few minutes will kind of outline maybe some of those points anyway. But yes, so I'm from Suffolk Chamber of Commerce, and we work in partnership with EDF and with Sizewell C to build this local supply chain so that when Sizewell C is given the go-ahead, that it's not just built by whoever has specialisms in areas, that actually there is a local benefit to businesses for the build and also beyond. Next slide, please. So firstly, just as a brief, this is the team. And I think this is one of the important things we like to outline at the start. There is a team of 6 of us, full-time employed, plus someone who comes in as a consultant to support us, that is dedicated to this. And when we say we're dedicated to the project, we are dedicated to the work we do with Sizewell C and with EDF, but also our main role is working for you as those local businesses. So what we're keen to do is to understand what you do, how you work, and the opportunities that you see within Sizewell. We will then help to identify those ways in which we can introduce you and get you involved in the project. And the team on there is there really to support you and to help you win work on this project. Next slide, please. So how does the project itself work? Well, what you've got at the top there, Sizewell C, they will be the client fundamentally, and they are the people that are going to build and run this nuclear power plant. Our role is to kind of sit in the middle to ensure that all aspects of the project are dealt with. So there will be alliances that will do the construction. Tom sort of alluded to various alliances that are taking part on the Hinkley Point project currently. And our role will be to work with those alliance partners, those large tier 1 contractors who will be in charge of what is built and when it is built and how it is built. And then we will find their local supply chain from there. So they will approach us with a set of works that can ensure that the project is on time and done to budget. And we will then, by using our portal, which we'll discuss a little bit later, find those local businesses across East Anglia that can perform those works and introduce them to those businesses. We'll also work very closely with the Sizewell C Consortium, who is a national group that is around large-scale infrastructure projects and ensuring that Britain has the opportunity to not only have these projects in the UK, but also that it's UK companies building them. And again, we work very, very closely with them to ensure that the best is for our region. And of course, fundamentally, as I mentioned, we're working for you to ensure that we can find you a place, encourage collaboration and joint ventures and working together to basically ensure that this large-scale project, as much as possible, is taken advantage for our region. Next slide, please. Now, I mentioned the consortium, and we like to just highlight this because this is a huge opportunity. Now, granted, a £20 billion project sounds huge, and it is huge. And a lot of the businesses we speak to are put off by the scale because they're not in nuclear, and a £20 billion project, for obvious reasons, is larger than most of us would ever have dealt with. But what we're keen to help business understand is that the project itself is then broken down, and we're there to help you find where you fit within it. Now, the Sizewell C Consortium did some work last year, working with the large contractors that will form the alliance partners and also the tier 1 contractors, particularly who work specifically in the energy sector, to work out theoretically what would be likely to be spent in certain regions of the country where there needs to be a focus. Now, if you take, for example, our region, they estimate that around £4.4 billion of this project can be spent through the east of England. And this is the area which we're working on behalf of. I know one of the comments, for example, was, do you have to be a Suffolk Chamber member? No, you don't. You don't actually have to be a Chamber of Commerce member of any of the 6 counties of Anglia that we are focusing on. What you have to just simply do is be involved with us, and you can engage with your local chamber, of course, as well. But we are working on behalf of all the other 5 chambers sort of listed on that little map in East Anglia to deliver for local and regional businesses. So that 4.4 billion is a realistic target as well. If you take Hinckley as an example down in Somerset, they have exactly the same relationship with Somerset Chamber, and they are looking at a local and regional area that stretches across South Wales and the Southwest, and they are approximately around 3.5 billion pounds to that local and regional economy already, and they're about halfway through build. Granted, some aspects will have obviously already gone through, so it's not, I don't think they're aiming for 7 billion, sadly, as much as they'd like it, but we have every reason to be optimistic that this could be a massive benefit to our region. Next slide, please. So we have sort of key themes which we aim at, and these are the themes of the project itself. But also what we want to ensure, and what Sizewell C wants to ensure, is that these themes go down through the entire supply chain. So you have to consider it local. Tom has spoken a little bit about why local, and hence we're involved in the project to kind of hammer home that message that local has a place on this project. But we want to ensure that the businesses involved in the supply chain are also doing the same. So are they producing local jobs, skills and opportunities for people and for other aspects of their supply chain? So we want you to be part of this local supply chain, but we also want to help you look at your own supply chains for Sizewell, but also for other projects, about how we can build a much more robust Suffolk or Anglian supply chain to help that circular economy and to help that local pound. And we are very keen on joint ventures. Yes, traditionally, we appreciate you'll be looking at other businesses as competition, but for this project, because of the scale and the size of it, collaboration is key. There has to be security of service for this project. We can't obviously experience delays. There's already enough delays before it's even started. So the key is, if we can get businesses working together, that gives security of service and supply, but also will encourage that growth and, importantly, that next point, that legacy for the future. Simon in particular touched on it at the start about the opportunity for this region, and Sizewell C should be seen as that first step, that we as a chamber look at Sizewell C as this massive opportunity, but actually we look at it beyond that as the catalyst for growth for this region. And we want to see whatever actions we and you as the SMEs in the region take for Sizewell C, that this leads to this legacy, that we keep these engineering and these energy sector jobs, we improve standards across areas of construction and other areas to really make East Anglian businesses the front foot for certain sectors, in particular when you look at the exciting developments of things like hydrogen and other areas of the energy. And the final thing, environment. Obviously, Sizewell C is a fundamental part of the government's aim for net zero 2050, but we also want to help you as businesses and what actions you can take to improve your own net zero, your own carbon efficiencies, and the things that you can do as a business to improve. And what's also quite important on that point, Tom talked about intelligent replication, and they are going to take all of the positive lessons learned from Hinckley and bring them to Sizewell. But technology is changing all of the time. And so we want to hear from local businesses who have ideas and ways of doing things that could actually be brought into the construction of Sizewell C. So just because it wasn't done at Hinckley, if there are better ways or newer ways of doing things, whether that's a product or a service or a way of doing things, we want to understand that, and we will help you as the chamber to get the introductions at the right time to the project. Next slide, please. And brief, I mean, you'll get this, but just to help you understand, we work for you. We are there to give you the support as much as we can to help understand what you're going to have to be part of the Sizewell C project. And that could well be some accreditations, that could well be training, it could well just be introductions and so on. But we will help you identify that as the project schedules and strategies become apparent and become visible. We will be sharing that information with you to ensure that you can be in the best place possible. We have the portal, and that is the most important place you can be. I'll talk about that a little bit more detail on the next slide. We will have plenty of events and communications throughout this year. Our first one is next week at the Mercury Theatre in Colchester by chance. So please, if you are registered, keep an eye on our socials, and we will be emailing out countless events over the next few months and even the next few weeks. We've got a number of them, and they could be face-to-face, they could be webinars and education-based events, but we will be trying to continue to supply as many forms of support as we can. We will break down into those work packages. Tom spoke earlier about some of the early works and the associated developments, and there's work already ongoing on some of those areas. Tom spoke a bit about biodiversity earlier, and there's work happening as we speak using local firms on some of the early biodiversity work for Sizewell C. So local businesses are already getting involved now. And final slide, please. And so the portal. The address is at the top. We didn't make it too difficult. Sizewellcsupplychain.co.uk. The key and the most important thing as a small business you can do at this stage is get yourself registered on the portal. And if you're already on the portal, A, thank you, but B, please revisit. We do appreciate lots of businesses maybe signed up pre-COVID, and there's been a lot of things, a lot of delays put in way, so it can get forgotten. But having a full and complete portal registration is the most important thing you can do at this stage, because our team, and a lot of them are on the webinar today, are to take that information when we get sight of information from Sizewell C or the lead contractors, and to then put you in front of them. We can only do that if your portal registration sells you. So please use it a bit like Google SEO. Put your keywords and your case studies and your examples on there, because the more information you can supply us, the better positioned we can make you. And also, it's also just important to have multiple contacts, because even for today's event, we supported Eager in some of the people to invite to this, and we obviously, people change jobs, but we need to ensure that we can get in touch with people when the opportunity is. It's frustrating if it's an Eager webinar that we can't get in touch with you. It'll be even more frustrating if it's a £25 million package and we can't get in touch with you. So please ensure you're visiting. What we do know is that Essex currently has about 180 companies registered. That's roughly about 11% of our portal database currently. So there is a huge opportunity for Essex businesses to get involved. Hence, we've got the event next week, and we'll be working much closer with the Essex Chamber of Commerce and the Essex Business Festival in April as well. We'll be attending. So we want to do more and help understand how we can bring Essex businesses into the supply chain for Sizewell C. And the exciting thing, Tom spoke earlier about the over one region in Hinckley. There is 42 companies in Essex already winning business at Hinckley. So again, if you're a business that potentially is interested in Hinkley Point C, get in touch with us. We can then do that work for you to help find out, is there an opportunity for you still, if you're in the right time, for Hinckley, because again, that puts you in that perfect position for learning, for then the future work that Sizewell will bring. The most important thing and the key is, engage with us. My email address is there. Happy for you to get in touch at any time. Please register and visit the website regularly, because there's a lot of support already on there. And we'll continue that process over the next maybe 3 to 6 months as the project kicks on, to then share that information with you. And like I say, I appreciate 1 or 2 questions have come in on that we'll answer a bit later. And that's me for now. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks so much for that. And as I say, do post your questions in the Q&A button that's at the bottom of the screen in the middle there. Any questions for Ashley or any of the other speakers today, please post your questions in the Q&A. Now, Alan Hyatt is next up. Alan, I'm sorry to do this to you, but we're running out of time, and I want to make sure we get a Q&A session. So if I can ask you to rattle through this as quickly as you possibly can, please, while still, of course, making sure you get all the opportunities across to our audience. So ladies and gentlemen, Alan Hyatt, who's an energy lead for East of England, from the Department for International Trade. Over to you, Alan.
Thanks, Simon. I just want to take a minute or two to explain to companies, in view of what you said earlier about the fact that there are opportunities, huge opportunities for the energy sector overseas as well, to explain how Department for International Trade can help individual businesses to win that new business. If I could have the first slide and the next slide, because we're already winning a lot of business. There are a lot of companies in the east of England winning business in offshore wind, solar, basically across the spectrum of the energy supply chain, and we're winning that business in existing and growing markets across the world. Western Europe, Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia are notable, but as well we're already in emerging opportunities in Central and Eastern Europe and Asia, Australia, and in the USA, which is something I want to talk about a little bit more in a moment or two. The important thing is that much of that new business is supported by DIT in the UK and through our colleagues in British embassies worldwide. Next slide, please. What we do is to work through our international network. There are international trade advisors like me, and as Simon indicated, I lead in energy in the east of England. I already know quite a few of the people on the call today, and it may well be that even if you don't know me, you already have an international trade advisor. I'll come back to that in a moment. I help companies on a one-to-one basis, liaising with commercial staff in more than 160 offices around the world that are all based in British diplomatic missions. These offices have specialists who know their markets, and particularly they know contacts. They can introduce you to the people that matter. We support events, we run events, we support exhibitions, we post business opportunity alerts as well. Next slide. In the east of England, I and my colleagues are liaison partners with the LEPs and with Eager and Orbis Energy and so on and so forth, at the same list of companies that Simon mentioned earlier. We create events and initiatives locally, as well as supporting events and initiatives around the world. If you take nothing else from my presentation today, it is that your local international trade advisor is your hub to DIT worldwide, to the local knowledge that exists out there globally. And if you don't already have an international trade advisor, my contact details will come up at the end. Please get in touch with me, and if it's not me, it'll be one of my colleagues, and we will make sure that we liaise on your behalf with our colleagues who are hungry to help you overseas. The next slide. Thank you. I just want to touch on a couple of examples of how we're helping at the moment. In the USA, which I referred to as being an emerging market, particularly for offshore wind, but also in solar and in other technologies, where in offshore wind, they've got hugely ambitious targets. They want to be as big as we are by 20, whenever it is, and they're doing it more or less from a standing start. There are East of England companies already working in conversation with my colleagues in New York and Washington about establishing partnerships and such like in the United States, because the one thing they don't have, they know a lot about oil and gas, but they don't have any experience really in offshore wind. And we're working closely, well, the market at the moment is across the eastern seaboard in general, but we're working very closely as DIT here in the east of England with Virginia in particular. And Virginia Beach Economic Development will be attending the International Partnering Forum in New Jersey in April this year. Now, Eager are going to be there. My colleagues will be there. If you want to be there, and if you're an Essex company in particular, we can help you to meet up with people who might actually buy something from you ultimately. If you're an Essex company, we might even be able to access some funding, but we would need to talk about that. Again, talk to me afterwards. Next slide, please. Because the second thing I wanted to talk about is something that I only learned about yesterday. You might think that because we're not in the EU anymore, that UK companies can't benefit from EU funding. Well, think again, because here's an example. The Spanish government are going to be deploying EU funding towards energy transition in Spain and their territories. And the Spanish government has recently established their priorities for energy transition in that respect. There's going to be a free-to-attend webinar next week, which has been organised by my colleagues at the British Embassy in Madrid, along with Catapult and significantly Iberdrola, who we all know from their activities in the UK. So you could find out more about that next week, and it's already on the Eager website, I understand, which demonstrates how we work closely with Eager and other partners. And I strongly recommend you register for that and find out what's going on. And apart from the next slide, which has got my contact details on it, or maybe not, it's alan.hyatt@mobile.trade.gov.uk. And we just get in touch with Eager and ask for Alan Hyatt's contact details if you need to talk to me. If you want to talk to me, happy to talk to anybody. And that's me, Simon. Thank you.
Just to say, Alan, that what we're going to do is when we send out the presentations to everyone after this event, all the contact details of all the speakers will be listed on there. So everyone will have everyone's contact details. So don't worry about that, Alan.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much.
So next up is our Q&A session. So if I could ask all our speakers and panelists today to turn their cameras on, and I'll start firing a few questions around, if I may. The first one I got through was for Skills for Energy. Is the Young Energizer program something that youth groups, e.g. Cubs, Scouts, Guides, etc., could use as part of their program? Who wants to answer that? Gabby, will you answer that, please?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you for the question, and completely suitable for groups like Guides or Scouts. I also forgot to mention that alongside the presentation, we will provide some accompanying information. So even if the person presenting doesn't have a STEM background at all, kind of all the information is there to still teach the students or young people effectively. So yeah, it's open to be used by any group. Thank you.
So any young person's group can contact Skills for Energy and benefit from the Young Energizer program. So that's great news. Another question out here is that is there a tender list outlining work that Sizewell C is procuring and seeking to procure? Ashley, will you answer that?
Not yet, is the honest answer. There is obviously we have a procurement schedule that we're working towards that was done some time ago and based on the works at Hinckley, because obviously ultimately it's an intelligent replication. I briefly spoke about the alliance, the Civil Works Alliance, so the initial alliance partners who'll be responsible for the first sort of 5 years or so of the project through construction. They have now been outlined and identified. They haven't been formally appointed yet, as they're still discussing what parts of the project each will take responsibility for. We anticipate Q1 with a good wind, if not Q2, that should all be formulated, and therefore we should then know what works we're going to be looking at in those early days. I think one of the comments that was there was particularly around the associated developments and maybe some webinars. I know there was some in October of 2020, I believe, before I joined the chamber. Yeah, I think in all honesty, just delays are from the project side of things, but also just then organising the funding and how the project is going to take off has just meant that type of activity, with hindsight, was now potentially premature. But the messages you would have received at that webinar are still true. So it will be very much those associated developments of the park and rides and the roads that will be the first things to be procured. And like I say, I would be disappointed, I suppose is probably the word to use, if by the summer we haven't got some of that information out to those businesses. But just stay in touch. Honestly, we don't mind any of the team an email just asking, because we'd rather at least say to you, no, there's no news, than maybe only hear from you a week too late. So yeah, just watch this space on that one.
And this is the question. It's more of a statement from Steve Madams at Archant, which is Insight Energy. There is a local website and a magazine called Insight Energy, which Archant publish. So just Steve's encouraging you just to Google that and then register with them, and then you can get their updates. Darren James, everyone, how do we engage EDF Sizewell C supply chain to offer support, please? I think you've largely covered that, Ashley, to be honest. So go to the Suffolk Chamber portal and have a look for the Sizewell C portal, register on there, and that's how you'll gain support, and or contact Ashley direct. I mean, just pick up the phone or email Ashley, and he will tell you more about how that can work. How will the financing of the project work? Ashley, can you answer that?
No, I'll leave that one.
Is Tom still on the line?
Yeah, I'm right in front of you.
Sorry, I can't see you. Sorry, Tom.
Yeah,
thanks.
okay. The financing of the project is, you'll all be aware that the financing of, many people be aware, sorry, sometimes you get caught in the sector bubble and thinking that everybody knows what you know, and most people with an interesting life don't. So the financing model for Hinckley the electricity market reforms brought in by the coalition government in particular were designed to try and incentivize private sector investment in new energy infrastructure, but it really didn't pan out that way. And of course, with the outlay of investment for new nuclear, it's very difficult to achieve that because they take a long time to build. And I think the average, stay in the chair for a chief exec of a FTSE 100 company is around 3 years. If you're going to propose to your shareholders that you'll invest in something that you yourself won't oversee a return on, it's just not a goer. So it was through contract for difference and the negotiated price of the electricity per megawatt hour was at £92.50, which at the time was very competitive, in particular with offshore wind and other renewables. But thanks to, of course, a lot of the investment and investment that we've made as consumers, and I say that in no pejorative terms whatsoever, because my company we run offshore wind farms and renewables as well, and it's important that we invest in them through our bills, because that's the way our energy infrastructure has to work in the future. But it was competitive on that basis at the time, but because of course thanks to that investment, the cost of renewables dropped very significantly. So the wholesale price of electricity also dropped as well, and they were far more competitive. And as a result, it was looking like nuclear couldn't compete. But the fact is that we require nuclear as part of the mix to stabilise and to make affordable energy prices, because it provides us that base load, dependable low carbon electricity alongside intermittent renewables. Storage is still incredibly expensive, and the way in which it works as well is very much used as backup at present, but there is more R&D going into that. But it was important to find a different route in order for investors to want to get involved in new nuclear projects. Hence why this legislation is going through Parliament at the moment, which would move towards a regulated asset-based model, which is used by utility companies, and a good example will be the Thames Skyway Tunnel. The idea is that investors do get a return on their investment during construction. And yes, there is a small addition to consumers' bills, but the idea is that consumers save money then once it's online and once it's as part of the mix of electricity being generated. So it is a genuine kind of investment into getting that more capacity of low carbon electricity into the grid, and then to saving eventually. So people can see the passage of the bill through Parliament. At the moment, the next stage is to go through the Lords, and we're hoping that we would see royal assent for the bill come May. But the important point then is the secondary legislation that will have to pass through Parliament, but a lot of that will be delegated, and that will put in place the statutory instruments that then make the new financing model effectively one that can be embedded. And we are talking to numerous investors at present who are showing an interest in the project. So it's genuinely going to be, EDF will have a stake, but it will be a minority stake in Sizewell C Co, and we'll be effectively then taking the project forward as we are, Sizewell C Co as the applicant, with EDF as a shareholder, possibly government too, but also with numerous British pension funds and so on.
Thank you, Tom. There's another question they're asking whether you have to be a member of the Suffolk Chamber. No, you don't. We've already answered that one. Gemma, would you like to answer just, did you have to be a member of EAGA to be able to benefit from Skills for Energy?
Yeah, I can answer that, and the answer is no. We're keen to work with anybody and everybody. Obviously, given that I work for EAGA, I'm going to fly the EAGA flag in terms of membership, and would certainly encourage people to sign up as EAGA members. But from a skills perspective, to do what we do, we have to work with everybody, and we're keen to work with everybody.
Thank you. Slightly controversial one for Tom. the type of power station you wish to build? Hasn't there been problems elsewhere with it?
Yeah, that's fair to say, but I think some of them have been somewhat exaggerated. Not least, we do have an operational EPR on the planet. Sometimes people suggest that it's an unproven technology. But first of all, the technology is proven. If you want to see it, go visit Sizewell B. That's a pressurized water reactor, and there are hundreds of them operating on the planet. But the first EPR to be built was in Taishan. And recently we have experienced, there has been the experience of technical difficulties with unit number 1. However, inspection work on that reactor has carried out on the fuel assemblies has shown that that the technical issue encountered during its second operating cycle, so after an outage, showed mechanical wear of certain assembly components. Mechanical wear is common in all industrial assets, and such a phenomenon has also been identified in a number of reactors in the French fleet, and that phenomenon does not question the design of the EPR. Fuel performance issues are not unusual in nuclear operations, and it doesn't pose any risk at all to people in the environment, and it will be corrected. Unit 2 continues to generate electricity. Olkiluoto is not an EDF project in Finland, but yes, it has had a number of delays. However, it has since gone through all of its criticality tests, and it's anticipated to be generating electricity this year. So there will be an EPR operating in Europe. And of course, Flamanville 3 has been bedeviled by delays, but it's worth bearing in mind it's the first of the kind. It was the first to start. It was the first of this design to actually start in construction. It's subject to all of the risks. And what it's actually done is it provided many of the lessons learned that got Taishan over the line quicker, lessons for Olkiluoto, and crucially lessons that we're taking forward for HPC. And HPC, bar the interruptions that all of our projects have experienced with COVID, is well on track. We were hoping Unit 1 would be 2025. It's now 2026, but that's due to the impact of the pandemic. Recently, we adjusted the schedule for Flamanville 3, taking account of the state of progress of the operations and preparation for the startup, which has been made more difficult by the pandemic. The fuel loading is rescheduled for the middle of next year, you know, we anticipate that, you know, once fuel loading and all the tests and so on, it won't be too long after that it's generating electricity. But the key point is that, you know, if you look at within the UK context, Sizewell, if you like, they are reactors 3 and 4 of the project. And just as Hinkley has learned from Taishan, Flamanville and Olkiluoto, we're learning from Hinkley too. And this is the point about replication. Replication is key in order to make sure that we deliver this efficiently, quickly. We do not have the first of a kind design risks that they had in Flamanville. We'll be aiming to deliver this to time and budget.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Tom. There's a statement from Simon Jeffries here. Simon, which is just saying that he tried to engage with you and heard nothing afterwards. But obviously, I would just say to Simon, we're going to send out these presentations afterwards. You'll have everyone's contact details there. Feel free to contact the chamber and feel free to contact.
Simon, I didn't reply to everyone in reply to that, but I did actually reply to Simon.
Great stuff. Thank you.
I think the important thing to note is that we're not actually, of course, building anything yet. We don't have a planning consent for it. So if you know, I have to say that the first ever supply chain conference was back in the very confident days of July 2010. To get the supply chain motivated and prepared. A lot of water has passed under the bridge, a lot of changes in government and so on, and a lot of changes in expectations and a lot of consultation in order to design the thing right. So what I would suggest is if you get on the portal, Ashley's team sends out a supply chain email every month, an update every month. It's an excellent newsletter that keeps everybody on that portal informed about what is going on with the projects. And if you are on the portal and you're not receiving it, then check your spam.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. I receive it, and yeah, it is a good newsletter. Thanks very much indeed to all our panelists. I've just got a couple more slides to wrap things up. I want to try and get you away on time. So thank you all our panelists. So if I can have the next slide, please. And the next slide. Yeah, so just this really is a once in a lifetime opportunity for companies in our region. You've seen the investment forecast there for the East of England, 122 billion pounds worth of investment. COP26, we all saw what was happening there in terms of the UK forging ahead towards net zero. There are massive opportunities for the East of England being at the centre of energy transition right the way across the UK. And I put some examples, some photographs there of some of the developments in Essex, in fact, that are going on. We've got Freeport East, we've got Sizewell C, we've got various solar farms, we've got Boreas and Vanguard from Vattenfall, we've got the East Anglian Hub, we've got North Falls and Five Estuaries wind farms. There are huge supply chain opportunities. There are great opportunities for young people in the skills agenda. Can you not afford to be a member of EGA? Can you not grasp this? You must grasp this. So can I have the next slide, please? So as I say, we can make introductions for you. We put on networking sessions and we offer discounted tickets to EGA members. We can help raise your brand profile through our marketing and social media channels. You can advertise your job vacancies on our website for free. We're very much the voice of energy for the region, and we got access to Skills for Energy and our various special interest groups as well. And collaboration is key for this. We're keen to try and encourage collaboration for wider partnerships and associations. Next slide, please. Thank you. So EGA Sessions, our next event is on the 24th of February. We have regular monthly events that we hold there, and we will put those on for you as well. So if you have a particular product or service you want to get across, contact us and we can put a session on for you. Our big conference exhibition is on 25th and 26th of May. We had to postpone it and delay it once again, sadly, but it will be going ahead, we hope, 25th and 26th of May. And there will shortly be a whole new events calendar on the EGA events web pages, so go to egaevents.com. So now I'm going to be wrapping up the session. I just want to thank everyone so much for being engaged today. We had over 70 people online at various points, so thank you very much indeed for your engagement. I was amazed at how many of you came along so early, so thank you very much indeed for getting up early. You may still be watching us in your pajamas, I don't know, but thank you very much indeed for your engagement. I'd also like to thank all our supporters and sponsors today. So that's Essex County Council, and in particular the North Essex Economic Board. Our other event sponsors, Sizewell C themselves, North Falls Wind Farm and Five Estuaries Wind Farm, and Freeport East, and also Suffolk Chamber of Commerce for engaging on this as well. Thank you all very much indeed for your engagement. We will be sending out, as I say to you, we will be sending up a follow-on to everyone. Thank you very much indeed for your participation today. Have a great afternoon and see you again soon, I hope. Take care. Bye-bye.